Hello and welcome to the Mr. Monster YouTube channel. I'm Mr. Monster. As a reminder, all stories told on this channel are either written and or created by me. So I hope you enjoy today's story, Window. Max looked up from his computer to see that it was almost 3 a.m. He sighed and rubbed his eyes. The gray-colored walls seemed to absorb all light, rendering the one lamp on his nightstand basically useless. He looked back at his laptop. The cursor on the document blinked, mocking him. Max's imagination started to personify it, saying in a condescending tone, "What's the matter?" "Did someone forget to finish their essay? Better hurry up. Only 3 more hours till it's due." Max yelled at the cursor, "How about you write a 20-page paper while your brother is in the hospital?" "Shut up, dude," Max heard from the other side of the wall, in the thin dorm room wall. He cringed, realizing he just yelled at not only an inanimate object, but a projection on a screen. "Just one more page and the last few sources," he whispered to himself. At 5:45 a.m., Max finally finished his paper. If he wanted to make it to class on time, then he wouldn't be able to check for grammar or spelling errors. He would just have to hope that it wouldn't hurt his grade too badly. Max started to pack his things when he opened the window to his room, which was more of a glorified closet, and saw a faint glow of the sun starting to rise. Open the window. Max spun around to see who was talking, but he was alone. He supposed pulling 2 all-nighters in a row was taking its toll, and the copious amounts of coffee and energy drinks probably weren't helping his mental state. He shook his head and slapped himself on the face. He put on his backpack and looked down at his computer to grab the paper. He then realized he forgot to put on pants, and he was still in his boxer briefs. Once he arrived in class, he promptly handed over his paper at the front of the room, downed a 5-hour energy, sat down. Upon sitting down, he realized the 5-hour energy might as well have been a sleeping pill. He closed his eyes in a slow blink. When he opened them, he realized class had not only already started, but judging by the amount that was written on the whiteboard, had been going on for at least 30 minutes. He pulled out his notebook and paper and started to quickly jot down notes. The rest of the class was without incident. Max had no idea what was being taught, nor did he even begin to understand it, but at this point it was par for the course in organic chemistry. 5 students had already dropped out this semester, and if Max had any money to spare, he would have as well. But to retake this class would simply cost way too much capital. Capital he didn't have. The young man was working 2 jobs and was still trying to make time to see his older brother in the hospital who was recovering from a stroke. The constant driving, 10 hours there and back on the weekends to see his brother was worth it, but nonetheless difficult. Max stumbled back to his dorm room from class and laid down to sleep. He didn't have any classes for the rest of the day with mandatory attendance, so he was just going to sleep the day away. Once he got into bed, it was 10 a.m. on his phone. He debated setting an alarm, but fell asleep before he was able to decide. His dreams took no time and delay. Max was in his room, but it wasn't his room. It looked like a room of someone in the early 2000s, or maybe late 90s. There was a Blink-182 poster on the wall and a flip phone on the desk. The woman on the bed was crying with her face in her hands. She looked up at Max. "Why are you here?" Max wasn't in control of his body. On a deeper level, he recognized he wasn't himself either. "I'm just worried about you. Your RA says you haven't been leaving your room as of late, and your friend Morgan says you haven't texted her back in over a month." The girl on the bed went from sad to annoyed. "I'm fine, Mom. I just really miss Jason, and there was this stupid drama with a girl in class." The mother chose to ignore the drama comment, suspecting that had little to actually do with her daughter's mood. "I know breakups are always difficult, honey, but I know you two said you weren't going to do the long-distance thing. But you could always reach out and see if he changed his mind." "I tried." "Oh, what did he say?" He said he already has another girlfriend and that he's sorry, but he doesn't want to get back together. Max felt the anger of the body he was inhabiting run through him, and a memory popped into his thoughts. It was of a young man saying, "Mrs. G, I'm going to do everything I can to marry your daughter one day." Max then realized he was Mrs. G, and she was mad. She knows she shouldn't take the word of a 15-year-old boy, but they had been exclusively dating since they were 12 years old. Why wouldn't he take her daughter's emotions into account? Mrs. G thought. She knew the train of thought was irrational, however. If we simply stayed together with people for their emotional states, no one would ever leave anyone. I'm going to go get your favorite sandwich from that shop down the road. Would you like a drink? The girl on the bed looked borderline offended, then responded, "I don't care." Mrs. G actually wanted to know. She suggested a drink she knew her daughter didn't like. "Okay, I think I'll get you a Mountain Dew then." The girl on the bed made a disgusted expression. "No, get me a Pepsi or something." Mrs. G nodded and got up to leave. And when she had opened the door and was about to leave, the girl on the bed spoke. "I love you, Mom. Don't ever think I don't." Her daughter's comment made Mrs. G smile. "I love you too, Madison. I'm sorry you have to go through this, but I'm here for you 100%. Her daughter made a small smile, the kind of smile you would give a stranger on the street to acknowledge their presence. Mrs. G closed the door, and the dream ended. Max's eyes fluttered open. Slowly. He turned to look at the clock above his desk. It was 12:30 p.m., exactly when his next class would be starting. But since he was not required to attend, he would just get the notes from the teacher posted online after class. He looked down at the desk, and next to his laptop he noticed a flip phone. Max stared at it in confusion. He rubbed his eye and blinked a few times, realizing it was just his wallet that in his post-sleep haze he thought was a flip phone. Max sat up and turned his head towards his small window. The other brick dorms across the lawn were starting to show their age. A thick black sludge had started to collect in the gutters, and the windows looked like they had been damaged by the sun. A golden sunrise tint had been stained on them. Max's dorm was taller than the others, 7 stories up instead of 5. Max looked out his window and noticed a small feminine figure. She was standing in the middle of a walkway, with students walking all around her, but her gaze was fixed on Max. He squinted to try and see better, however, it was no use. The figure was simply too far away. The woman slowly lifted her head and beckoned Max, calling him closer, almost as if to say, "Jump." Max turned on his heels, and the figure was in his room, but as soon as he blinked, it disappeared. He stood there for a moment, utterly stunned. His memory of what just happened was already hazy, like forgetting a dream as soon as you wake up in the morning. Max sat down on his bed and considered. He had heard of people hallucinating when they were sleep-deprived, but he also figured it would take more than 2 days of being awake to do that. He considered for a moment, then decided the best course of action was to go back to sleep. Clearly he needed the rest. Once his head hit the pillow, he was out cold. No tossing or turning required. This time, he was in the sandwich shop, paying for 2 wrapped sandwiches and a couple of Pepsis. As he looked down to grab the sandwiches, he realized his hand was the same he saw before, slightly tanned older skin with a ring on the left hand to indicate marriage. He was once again Mrs. G, and just like before, he was only along for the ride. She walked out of the shop onto the busy street corner. Many people were coming and going, this way and that way. Most of them were college students. However, a few local children and parents were scattered into the mix. Mrs. G walked back into the dormitory and realized she had accidentally tried to go into the one opposing her daughters. She looked up and saw Madison staring longingly out the window. Mrs. G waved, but It didn't appear Madison noticed her. She made no acknowledgement. Then Mrs. G crossed the lawn and entered the dormitory with the help of the receptionist, who knew Mrs. G was there doing a welfare check on her daughter, as per an earlier discussion. The elevators had a line that Mrs. G did not want to wait in, so she decided to take the stairs. Realistically, the stairs would have actually taken longer than waiting for the elevators, but Mrs. G supposed she could use the exercise. A few students passed her. One young female student, who seemed to be in a rather big hurry, who was wearing sunglasses and a hoodie with the hood up. Mrs. G supposed the student was probably hungover. She had heard that the sorority rush had started on campus, and Mrs. G remembered how chaotic it was for her to attend in her younger days. Once she reached the 7th floor, she heard some people scream. It sounded far away, and judging by the pitch of the scream, it was probably just some young women getting excited about something. After opening the door to the 7th floor, Mrs. G stepped out and walked down the hall. When she turned the corner leading to her daughter's room, she noticed that the door to the room was propped open haphazardly, with a fallen desk chair. Mrs. G rushed into the room and saw that the window was open. Her daughter was nowhere in sight. She rushed over the window, fearing the worst. Mrs. G looked down to the side of the building, her eyes settling on the giant splatter of red on the sidewalk, and her daughter's contorted figure, and her daughter's body was contorted at strange angles, with bone sticking out of her shins, suggesting Madison had jumped feet first. Shock reverberated through Mrs. G's body, a rush of adrenaline so strong that it made Mrs. G feel as though she was almost high. Madison had gone out the same way her father did, on her terms. Alright, that's going to do it for part 1 of Window. I hope you guys enjoyed the story. I will be releasing the next part tomorrow. This one will be out on Friday at 4 p.m., as long as I edit it in time. And the next one will be out on Saturday at 9 a.m., as per my usual upload schedule. So I hope you enjoyed this telling of the story, The Window. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and share it with your friends if you think they would enjoy it as well. And yeah, that's going to do it for me. As always, I am Mr. Monster, and I am out.